I'm going to make 3 points. One is to say a little about my role at CPAX between 1991 and 97. Secondly, to look at how I came at that role. And then thirdly, to make some reflections on the contemporary situation. So beginning with my role at CPAX, I had been in Perth running a peace research institute from 1986 through until the beginning of 91. I was transferred back to Sydney and was at a function where I met Peter King. Peter was the supervisor of my very first PhD. So I've known Peter since 1973. And Peter then got talking about CPAX, which had been launched while I had been in Perth. And Peter was about to head overseas on one of his overseas jaunts. And so, as you've heard, Stuart became the honorary director, I became the honorary president. The division of responsibilities is that Stuart dealt with the internal politics of the universities. Academics above my blood pressure, so I'm glad that Stuart took care of the toe cutters within the university. I saw my role as an evangelist, to make peace respectable. I know it's very hard to imagine that peace was not respectable, but when they were establishing the ANU Peace Research Centre, and I had a meeting with the minister, I was then president of the UN Association, we were lobbying for it, the bureaucrat who came in with me, when I said, well, we're hoping we're going to get the centre in Sydney, the bureaucrat, this is 1984, said, no, we're going to keep it in Canberra. We've got to keep a close eye on it. Peace is obviously dangerous. And so in 91, when I got the opportunity to become the honorary president, I saw my role, because I've got links with the media, of trying to publicise the peace issue, and in particular to make sure CPAX was more well known. And the university media section did a survey of media coverage, and I was actually getting more media coverage than Dane Leone, the Chancellor. So I've seen myself as almost the ambassador for CPAX, because I think you've got to get out there and talk to the middle class, mainstream parts of society and make peace respectable. If for those of you who want to read about some of the controversy over peace research, great article by Peter Hastings in the Sydney Morning Herald, 4th of July 1983, dealing with the politics of creating that Peace Research Centre. I was president for 7 years. I resigned to reinvent myself, rebrand myself as a foreign affairs commentator, and that I can still run with a peace agenda, but I'm no longer tagged as a peace activist. So I've reinvented myself. If you go to the website, you'll find that I'm on radio on average once a day, as well as doing Channel 7. So I try to make foreign affairs accessible to the Channel 7 viewers. And not just, when I broadcast on the ABC, which I do quite often, I'm talking to Fitzroy and Carlton. When you do commercial media, you're broadcasting to Australia. And that's where I think a lot of the battle has got to be fought. So my role at CPAX for 7 years was trying to make peace respectable, which I think it now largely is. It's not a controversial topic, still underfunded at the university, but we've made it respectable. Secondly, how did I come to that role? I've been involved with the peace movement in one capacity or another since the mid-1960s. And so I'm very much a child of the movement. I was president of the UN Association in the 1980s. We lobbied for the Peace Research Centre, later established at ANU. I then later went on and ran a Peace Research Institute for the Uniting Church in Perth. The Uniting Church has got a lot of money for social justice matters, so I was running that institute for 5 years. There's always money, I find, for a good project. It's never a shortage of money, it's a shortage of ideas. That's why people like Stella Cornelius can be located and get involved. If you've got to have those ideas, the money comes along later. I've never had financial problems. It's the ideas, and then winning support for those ideas. I also, in my time, I worked with Stella Cornelius, who is one of the great figures of conflict resolution in this country. And the dilemma that Stella and I had was, do we work through the academic stream? As we've heard, she went off to deal with Macquarie. There's a great story I could tell about Macquarie and the sum of money she gave there, which they then pissed up against the wall. On the other hand, do we work in the civilian sector outside the university, away from the toe cutters, and try to work as we do with the Conflict Resolution Act, which continues to flourish? And we've got a network of people. So that was Stella's approach. We try to get it out into the mainstream, make conflict resolution, peace studies important for people. My approach was a triangle of peace, so in other words, disarmament, conflict resolution, and looking at the underlying issues of justice. The tree of peace has its roots in justice. So you've got to work simultaneously on all those trees. It's got to be a holistic approach rather than just talking about one thing or the other. My current interests are Ministry for Peace, which I began at the encouragement of Stella Cornelius. And secondly, we're working on the Peace Industrial Complex, which you'll see on Wikipedia, and that was the subject of my second doctorate, looking at the creation of a peace industrial complex to reply to a military industrial complex. For example, one of the funders of Helen Caldecott was the widow of Ray Kroc at McDonald's, because McDonald's realised in the event of World War III there'll be nobody around to buy hamburgers, and so they financed Helen Caldecott. And they're also financing peace research at Notre Dame. So that's how I came to my role, long involvement in peace research, but also trying to be innovative and to break out of the strands, the bounds that so often confine the way that universities try to operate. Concluding with a series of contemporary reflections. One, as we've heard, most Australian peace research centres have gone. Why didn't they survive? What has been special about CPACs that's enabled it to survive when all the others, Macquarie, ANU, Melbourne, Queensland, why have they all gone? I think this is a great research topic for a PhD, and I would encourage people to start their research now while the dinosaurs are still alive, because we're dying off. Secondly, the peace movement itself has also declined, and that's a natural ally for peace research. And again, people are dying off there. Only last week I was at a meeting for finance groups, and we were paying tribute to Mavis Robertson, who not only was interested in social justice, but she was also one of the inventors of the superannuation scheme, particularly looking after the rights of workers. And we lost Mavis a few days ago. So we've lost the peace research centres. We've also lost the peace movement. Three, even broader, I think the university business model is broken. I think, and I endorse the views of others who've said that in a few decades' time, there are probably about 20 boutique universities left around the world. I think one will be Oxford. I think the university model, because of the MOOCs, the massive online open courses, Coursera, and all the other new developments that are coming along, makes so much of the university work irrelevant. Remember, Moore's law, the doubling power of computers, has transformed the Encyclopaedia Britannica, destroyed it. It's destroyed the newspaper business model. Gone. Fairfax, the world's oldest newspaper dynasty in the English-speaking world, is collapsing. Why should universities be spared? So my third comment is for those of us who've got an interest in universities. I love universities. I've just been awarded my third PhD, so I love universities. But I'm just very worried about the future of universities, because I see so much of contemporary life being transformed. For example, Club of Rome conference last November, we're talking about the fact that no human being will be driving a car in 15 years' time. It'll all be Google. Mercedes are working on a driverless truck. Audi now had the land speed record for driverless cars in Europe. The British last week amended the laws to enable driverless vehicles to come along. So massive amount of changes occurring with Moore's law. The doubling power of computers, it must flow over somehow to the universities. So the third thing is, I think the university business model is broken. My support for you if you're going to continue with peace research within the university, but I think you're actually bolted on to a Titanic which is sinking. 4, universities are no longer the gatekeepers for information. You've got the rise of some non-governmental organisations and also think tanks. I think when I look at the work done by, say, Lowy, which has just burst upon the scene, don't always agree with their research, but you've got to acknowledge that they're the ones who are occupying the space, and they're the ones who attract a lot of attention. So universities are no longer the gatekeepers. And my fifth and final comment is the mass media are now even more difficult wicket on which to play. As I've said, the traditional media outlets are in decline. Meanwhile, you've also got the rise of social media. Everybody are potentially journalists now and broadcaster through YouTube and whatever. It's a whole new revolution that's occurring in the media. So it makes it actually much more difficult to get the peace message out, particularly with the prevailing climate of fear, which ironically takes us back to really where we were 25 years ago when we were concerned about the nuclear issue. The nuclear issue still remains. Meanwhile, politicians find it in their own interest to whip up fears about terrorism, greatly overrated. But in the same way that President Eisenhower said there was a military industrial complex, then we similarly have a terror industrial complex. And a number of people make money out of terrorism. I'm one of them. If you're working in the media, you're making money out of terrorism. And this makes our job in terms of trying to put across a more peaceful approach to issues, trying to make for a more sophisticated approach to understanding issues, all the much more difficult. So I think that CPAX in its 25 years has had a remarkable rate of survival when pretty well all of its contemporaries have failed. There must be some secrets for the CPAC story that will inspire others into the future, but we need to realise that we've got broader challenges ahead of us in terms of the peace research area. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.